and welcome. We are here for the first episode of As the Badge Turns podcast. So welcome to all of you. Again, this is focused on law enforcement. This is focused on policy, public safety. We want to be able to bring in special guests each week, which we have a very esteemed colleague with us today, which I'll introduce momentarily. But again, this is about having a conversation each week. So we want the guests to kind of lead what our topics are going to be. If you want to hear more about what we're going to be doing in the future, make sure you follow us on all social media as well as YouTube. We'll have a podcast, video and audio. Yes, you can see all of us in full effect as you see here. We'll be posting this out on our website, which is Prime Health Services. So thank you for the headline sponsor. And with no further ado, we're just going to jump right into it. My name is Scott. I'm joined by Nico. We're with Prime Corrections and Prime Health Services. And our first guest, who will also be the anchor of this podcast and co-host going forward, but we thought we'd start today with introducing Sheriff Rich Stanek.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Morning.
So in this, again, we really want to kind of dig into what you're doing currently, as well as what your storied past has been. But help us out with, how did you start in law enforcement to begin with?
Well, let me just go over, a bit about the career, but it's an interesting story how I got engaged in this to begin with. And we can talk about that maybe a little bit later. But, I served about what is now 45 years in public safety, public service. I started way back in 1980 as a police reserve officer for the city of Minneapolis in Minnesota. I eventually, went on to college at the University of Minnesota. I got a couple degrees in public safety and law enforcement, criminal justice. I served as a Minneapolis police officer from late 1983 up until I retired 25 years later. In between all that, I had a chance to serve as a state legislator here in Minnesota. In the Minnesota House of Representatives, I chaired public policy, finance, and policy committees, met a lot of great people. And I always wondered, who makes all these laws that us police officers have to enforce while working nights? And so kind of intrigued me. I didn't think I was going to run for the legislature, much less ever get elected to it, but I got elected 5 times. And I had fun serving out my 10 years. I left there in 2002 or so to work with the new governor of Minnesota at the time. His name was Tim Pawlenty. And so I had a chance to work with my governor in his cabinet as his commissioner of public safety and director of Homeland Security immediately following September 11 of 2000. So in that role, I was responsible for the Homeland Security side, emergency management as well, but really state law enforcement assets like the Minnesota State Patrol or State Police, Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which is, our crime lab and investigation side, and had a great time doing it. A couple thousand different employees scattered around the state of Minnesota who worked really hard, were diligent, really good at what they did every day. But I always wanted to return back to Minneapolis, finish out my local law enforcement career. And so I did that. I put in about 25 years total with Minneapolis Police. I took a brief 3-month time off, and then I came back, ran for sheriff of Hennepin County, got elected. Again, much to my surprise. A lot of people running back then to be sheriff of Hennepin County. It's a large county. As you know, it's about 1.4 million residents scattered across 45 different cities. It's a full service law enforcement agency from patrol divisions, civil, warrants, crime lab, water patrol, running a jail that at the time was booking about 35 to 40,000 people a year through the front doors. It was high risk, high volume, and I had a lot of good people working for me, about 1,100 total between full-time and special deputies or what are volunteers. I served 12 years as the Hennepin County Sheriff and then retired out in early 2019 formed a nationwide consulting group called Public Safety Strategies Group. And now I work with clients all over the U.S., helping them get into the public safety marketplace, helping them understand what chiefs and sheriffs are looking for, and really being that kind of that middle guy, that broker in between what we call a trusted partner or a relationship broker. And it works out really well. As you know, Scott and Nico, I now live in northern Minnesota. What once was a cabin, now a lake home on a beautiful lake, surrounded by trees and forests and all kinds of wild animals. A little different than living in the urban environment of Minneapolis, Hennepin County.
No, absolutely. So, yeah, thank you for taking us down that path for sure. So, a lot happened during those years. So, from going from an officer to a sheriff, and then in the other legislative roles that you held, what would you see as some of the biggest changes in policing that you've seen over your career, and where that you were able to have an impact and hopefully change that?
Well, I think, one of the biggest impacts I've seen over the years, or biggest changes in the use of technology as it relates to law enforcement. Back when I started, we still had gumballs on top of the squad cars for light bars, not the things we have now. Sirens were mounted on the side, and now they're all throughout the vehicle. You can't miss the squad car driving down the road, and all of them were marked, unlike today where a lot of squad cars are unmarked, really hard to see by the public. Now, there's a reason for it, but again, people agree to disagree what those reasons are. I just think about the technology. I mean, I carried a 6-shot revolver. When I left, I was carrying a 17-round handgun, semi-automatic handgun. We started out carrying shotguns, pump action shotguns. I left carrying an AR platform type weapon. I didn't have a taser when I started, but we had them when we ended. Carried a 5-cell flashlight when I started, maybe a baton. Today we use, rechargeable flashlights. Portable radios they were really big, like big, big, big. Today they're like little tiny in their earpieces, much like the earpods I have on for this podcast. Just think about technology, what an officer looked like back in 1983, 84, 85 versus, 2023, 2024, now 2025. Dramatic differences. Most good, some not so much. But again, it's the opinion of the individual.
Sure. What do you care to comment on what some of those challenges, differences, maybe opinions are today versus, maybe what you thought back then has been shaped not just by technology, but experience, and obviously public opinion factors into all this too?
Well, just think about some of the technology. I mean, I'm a big believer that we use technology to protect the public and solve crime, but you've got on the other side the push from privacy and civil rights advocates. You've got to balance the two out. Things like body-worn cameras, license plate readers, and others are great technology. But, the caution flag goes up when dealing with the public or other elected officials about what that might mean.
Do you think that's really brought on an increased level of scrutiny with regard to how you do your job? I mean, times when you might have, this is a good kid, you ran this stoplight. Now you have to document everything, a little bit about that.
What's interesting, I'll just give you maybe just two quick examples. I was in the great state of Arizona outside of Phoenix a couple months ago, and there was a very erratic driver all over the road, cutting people off in and out of traffic, way over the speed limit. He was purposely challenging other drivers. I was minding my own business, driving along, but I did make that 911 call to the Arizona State Patrol. I eventually ended up meeting with a state trooper who said to me, "Well, do you have that car on video?" Now, why would I have video in my personal vehicle to record another erratic driver? And without that video, there was nothing the state trooper, was going to do about it. That was how they view things today. That is dramatically different, than a while back. Now, if you get in the back of an Uber, Lyft, maybe a taxi cab, you're going to have cameras. They watch you everywhere. Try and go through the parking lot of a big box store like a Walmart or a Target store. It's everywhere on camera. You have cameras at your homes, both inside your home, outside your home. You got to balance out those privacy, civil liberties. We give up a lot. I, like both of you, travel through the airport all the time, and your listeners aren't any different. You know, metal detectors, body scanners, cameras, people watching you for behavior analysis. Where does it stop? Where does it end? Are those lines blurred? They're all great questions. We could delve into this for hours and hours and hours, and maybe another episode, you'll pick one or two pieces of this technology that I talked about and say, how did we get there? Is this for the betterment of society or not so much?
Yeah, and to that, and trust is a major theme in public safety. How can law enforcement build or rebuild that trust? And let me just use that one example you just referenced, Rich, where the officer asked you for video proof, and I'll just say, was it he wasn't going to do anything about it, or he couldn't do anything about it? But in that, you come to some conclusions. So in that, again, trust as a major theme in public safety today. How can you see law enforcement continuing to build on top of that and hopefully normalize it and make it be seen as a benefit of what we're trying to do? Protect and serve, right? That's kind of leads with most conversations.
Yeah, protect and serve. You'll see it on the side of squad cars. You'll see respect, integrity. You'll see all kinds of quick little slogans or branding and different markings on the side of squad cars. It really is about the community in which you serve, whether it's a small community of 4,000 or 5,000 people, or maybe a large county like Hennepin or larger. There's no way I knew 1.4 million people, although my wife is convinced that I know a good many of them
Yeah.
because I run into them all the time. But you've got you police according to the community itself and their standards. They set the boundaries, they set the guardrails for their local law enforcement, which is why a lot of cities, whether they're just a couple thousand people or a couple 100,000 people, like to have their own police departments. They like to have their own police chief, their own officers, the name of their city on the side of the car, even though they get a lot of services from their county sheriff. And then, like I said, not all police departments, not all sheriffs are created equal across the country. There are definitely some themes. You go to Florida, where we spend a lot of time, obviously. And, down there, the sheriff, well, I don't want to say carries the big stick, but literally carries the big stick. He or she, as the sheriff, is responsible for law enforcement throughout their county. And it could be hundreds of thousands, if not more, people, residents. And they have very few smaller police departments. Other parts, like the East Coast, traditional sheriff's office where they do courts, civil process, run the jail. In the upper Midwest, where I come from, whether you're in Milwaukee or Dane County or Minnesota, Hennepin County, we provide full service law enforcement, and we work in tandem or in conjunction with those other 45 cities within my county. 36 of them had local police departments. You try and figure that one out. I'd like to work with 36 mayors, 36 sets of city council, 7 county commissioners, 17 state senators, 33 House members, and then who knows how many different school board members and local elected planning commissions. And that's a lot of work. No wonder why I was so tired at the end of every day.
So how did you to that? How did you balance all of that?
Again, you err on, well, could I? But in terms of life work balance, you err on the side of local autonomy. Local autonomy is king, kind of like when they say cash is king. People do a lot of stuff for cash. Same thing with politics. All politics are local. These aren't just cliches. They are rules to live by, truly, if you're an elected official. Sheriffs are elected officials in most parts of this country. There are a couple sheriffs who are appointed, but the vast majority out of the 3,089 sheriffs in this country are elected. And that means something. It means they don't work for their mayor or city council or governor or even the president of the United States. They work for the residents that make up their county. Whether you voted for me or not, you are my boss. I work for you. A little different with the local police department where they say, well, you know, I work for the mayor, I work for the city manager, I work for the city council. They're elected officials. I don't necessarily work for you, Mr. and Miss Citizen, individually. Contact your local elected official. It's not the same for a sheriff. You are that local elected official.
So in that, what do you think is often misunderstood about the relationship between elected officials and law enforcement agencies?
Well, I hear it all the time. This is one of the things that if you run into a sheriff and you call a sheriff's department, the vast majority of them will go, no, not so much, and they'll ignore you. They are not a department of a city or a department of a county or a department of the government. They are an office. There is the sheriff's office, which is the day-to-day work of an elected official and all that comes with it. And then there is the day-to-day work of running that law enforcement agency. Most sheriffs will have, you either call them a chief deputy, they call them an undersheriff, they call them an assistant sheriff. All three virtually mean the same thing. It just depends what part of the country you come from and what type of vernacular they use.
Absolutely.
It's
What-
interesting, Scott and Nico, because I get these questions all the time, and it's a great conversation to help educate your guests as you get into As the Badge Turns. I love that. I love that tagline. I love working with Prime Health and what you guys bring to the table for public safety. You're not just technology, you are innovative and you are real in terms of those cost savings and the work that you do. But I get this question all the time. What's the difference between a sheriff and a police chief? They kind of look alike, although sheriffs are usually pretty dang tall. Sometimes they wear those cowboy hats, sometimes big buckles and boots. I did not do that. Normally, you'd see me in a uniform, a working uniform, day-to-day working uniform, maybe in a suit and tie, depending on where I'm at. You'd never see me at the office in a pair of blue jeans and a polo shirt. That's just not the style nor the respect that the office deserved in Hennepin County, and I treated my citizens likewise.
So you've worked across both law enforcement and legislative sides. How does policy shape public safety at the local level?
That's a great question. So, and then there are two kinds of sheriffs. Well, three kinds of sheriffs in the country. There are elected and appointed. We talked about those a little bit. Very few appointed. Most are elected. If you're down in Florida, where I know you guys spend some time on the beach like Nico, that's why he's so dang tan. You know, Miami-Dade's a great example. For years they had an elected sheriff. 30, 40, maybe 50 years ago, they went to an appointed sheriff. And now recently they went back to an elected sheriff. And Sheriff Stephanie down there is doing a great job. She's thrown into, kind of the chaos and the mess, and she's getting it done. People support her. You've got the other side, where our sheriffs across the country who, I think, well, like I said, there were 3,089 of them. Every square inch of this country is covered by a county, right? And those counties, some counties have vast square miles of land and geographic. Now you can go to Riverside County, California. It's a very populous county. It's a very wealthy county. Sheriff Bianco does a great job there. But if he wants to go to a meeting somewhere in one of his contract cities, he has to fly there by helicopter, because you're not going to get there by squad car or, transportation. Likewise, other parts of the country. And then there's some like, Hennepin County, we were 600 square miles, but I could traverse back and forth. I could be in downtown Minneapolis, and 50 minutes later, I could be in the far western reaches of my county, where they have cows and horses and sheep and all kinds of things. A lot different than what I see in downtown Minneapolis these days.
Absolutely.
Bridging on that, being someone who was in the legislature, serving as sheriff, how did lobbyists affect that process?
First off, are you a registered lobbyist?
No, I am not.
Oh, good. All right. Good. Well, registered lobbyists are a unique breed. They are absolutely needed. They are worth their weight in gold if they're good at what they do. But their job at the end of the day is on behalf of a client, maybe like Crime Health Services, to help a policymaker see it your way. And some are good at it, some not so good at it. A lot of the lobbyists come from former public policymakers, like former legislators. I certainly, have had a chance over the years to walk that fine line between being a lobbyist and not. I choose not to register as a lobbyist because I don't like that kind of work. I don't like, convincing my friends, whether I believe in it or not, that this is the right thing to do. And you could take it from there about what that means. But, lobbyists as a whole, I've got a lot of friends who are lobbyists. I think they have a needed place, but they absolutely directly impact public policy. You can't get things done without them. They have knowledge of the process, which is worth its weight in gold once you learn it, which is why former legislators make pretty good lobbyists. If you understand what a bill is, what the process is going through the House or the Senate floor, if you understand committee deadlines, if you understand the procurement process, that's everything. Much less Robert's Rules of Order. If you have to be in the House or the Senate floor and you have to pontificate for 15 minutes about an issue, it's freedom, but it's kind of daunting as well.
So what do you see as the biggest issues facing sheriffs across the country today?
Well, again, I hope we get into some of this more in depth over the next few
Absolutely.
episodes. But, I see number one, like I talked about, technology. Two, I would say the borders and immigration. What does it mean? What doesn't it mean? How does it affect average citizens day to day? And don't ask me public policy issues like the economy. Sheriffs don't weigh in on that. Talk to me about public safety, violent crime. Talk to me about running our jails, right? Jails are a huge risk and liability for us. Most sheriffs run or operate their jails, but bad things happen. Ask us about the fentanyl crisis in this country where you've got tens of thousands of people dying every year, and you go, what? What's going on here? Ask us about juvenile crime. Ask us about traffic safety, how many people die on the roadways and why. This little thing called, I'll show you. A little thing, oh, that's a cute little picture of my grandson too, a promotion there. That is Caden. I got his name wrong the other day. I called him something else. Like, traffic safety, cell phones, people on their cell phones all the time. You could use wireless like what we're doing, but still,
Absolutely.
if you're talking on the phone and you're trying to pay attention, that's a recipe for disaster. We tell you to put the phone down. We tell you, focus on your driving. Are you going to do it? Not so much. Just think about, my wife used to ask me all the time about multitasking. Can sheriffs multitask? Sure we can. I can be talking on my AirPods on my wireless phone at the same time listening to the my favorite country western station on the radio. I can be scanning 3 different radio channels in my county, listening for call numbers or what incidents are happening in Minneapolis or one of the other 44 cities, or from the sheriff's office itself. I can be talking to who's ever sitting in my passenger seat, having a conversation about what they're doing this weekend. And I'll have my windows rolled down, scanning the environment. That is the true task of multitasking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a few minutes to go, but before we do, wanted to ask a couple more questions, and certainly Nico jump in on any of these if this prompt.
Come on, Nico, get in here.
But the next one, so with everything changing, and you spoke a lot of it, Sheriff, everything changing, technology, politics, public pressure, what advice would you give to the next generation of law enforcement?
I just had a young woman the other day ask me if I would talk with her son, who is about 14 years old. And of course, he's doing his school project, and he has to think about what he wants to do when he gets a little bit older and heads off to college, because 14 is not too early to start thinking about it these days. And, you asked about the pressing issues facing law enforcement, recruitment and retention of our employees, and the health and wellness of them, of the ones we currently have, are really important to us as well. But in this case, 14-year-old boy who I'm going to meet with next week, help him figure out, well, what's the pros and cons of going into law enforcement? There's something else. Of course, he wants to go right into being a detective, like some of his favorite TV shows. Right. And I'm like, well, it's not quite that easy. You don't just start out doing that. First, you got to, slug it out for the next 8 years, working a squad car somewhere. And making traffic stops and burglary calls and doing boring reports and patrolling endless hours of boredom down dark city streets. Now, but then maybe you can become a detective if you ever get promoted or if your agency is big enough to have that upward mobility. Not everybody does. And so you got to figure out and strategize a little bit, just like you guys. I'm sure you didn't start out as, CEO and Nico extraordinaire working for Prime. You probably had some lesser jobs along the way. And through upward promotion, mobility, hard work, integrity, here you are. You're joining me on a podcast today. That's a pretty good deal.
I think so.
My career.
And to be clear, because we will have many listening, COO.
COO.
Mine right.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, again, I just wanted to thank you, Sheriff, for taking the time today. Again, your experience reminds us that, public safety isn't just about the laws we enforce, it's about the people we serve. I think you hit on that early in our conversation. Certainly, I think you teed up a number of great topics in the future. Again, we want the guest to drive the content of As the Badge Turns. So Rich will join me every week if he's able to. Nico will join us as he's able to. We'll continue just to build out a list of attendees. I know we're working on the Rolodex right now, right? So we want to have compelling conversations with thought-provoking leaders that can ideally change the industry.